Welcome to NinjaCast, a photography podcast powered by Studio Ninja, the world's highest-rated business management app, built specifically for photographers. Listen and learn as the most successful photographers on the planet share their knowledge to help you transform every element of your photography business. Here's your host, Sally Shaw.
Hi guys, welcome to NinjaCast. Today I'm joined by the lovely Ronald. Eric's going to be covering all sorts with us today, from his history as a cinematographer working in the TV and film industry, right through to how photographers really need to be aware of burning out and what they can do to stop it. Let's get started. Hi Eric, how are you?
Good, Sally, how are you?
I'm really well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. I've got a feeling this is going to be a very good one today.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure across the interwebs using the wonders of technology. We're all very comfortable with Zoom these days, aren't we?
For sure, absolutely. I mean, isn't it crazy that we can speak to each other from the other side of the world, literally? For us, obviously, I'm in the UK, so it's incredible, you know, the fact that we can communicate across just the computer, just Zoom.
It really is. When you think of certainly when I was a kid, it was like the dial-up phone where it's like, and all that stuff. It's real Star Trek stuff that we're in now. So yeah, amazing times. Love it.
Fantastic. So for our listeners that may not have heard about you, Eric, can you give a little bit of an introduction about what you do, your journey and your career so far?
Sure. Well, I am Eric. I am a wedding photographer. I've been shooting weddings for about 10. It almost sounds like the start of an AA meeting,
doesn't it?
But yeah, so shooting weddings for about 10 years. What can I tell you? As a wedding photographer, probably the middle chunk of my career was very destination wedding heavy, and certainly helped along by COVID, but also some other work-life balance stuff. Just keen to really focus on home turf. And yeah, for the current climate that we find ourselves in, that's not really a choice that I have anyway. So that's all good.
Absolutely.
Prior to shooting weddings, I had a bit of a meandering career. In high school, wanted to be a filmmaker, a cinematographer. And I got really obsessed with watching films, reading books, watching a whole bunch of movies. And then I went off to film school. And so, yeah, I kind of was on that path. And I did it for a good few years and did some really terrible R&B music videos and stuff like that. And yeah, corporate stuff, short films, things like that. And it was a bunch of fun, but there were some things that didn't quite work for me at the time for a whole range of reasons. Probably not worth digging into too deep for this combo, but then I kind of was at a bit of a loss. I spent all these years going, all right, you're going to be a cinematographer and you're on this path. And then it's like, oh, crap, what do I do now? And so I sold my soul and got into television, as all failed filmmakers do. No, that's not true. That's a joke. But I basically then dived into a good long, close to 10 years working in TV, mainly around studio television. You guys in the UK have your equivalent shows like Deal or No Deal and Dancing with the Stars and all those. So I was in the technical department churning those shows out, real champagne television. And
people want though, right?
That's what the people want. Give the people what they want. Totally. I'm all for that. And hey, actually, Dancing with the Stars was actually a really fun show to be involved with because it was live. There was a lot of pressure around bumping sets in and out and things that could go wrong. And so that was kind of cool. But Deal or No Deal was a bit of just a game show sausage factory. But hey, that had some good times too. I guess from there, a big turning point, or like the major turning point in my adult life was in 2007, my brother passed away quite tragically. It's like a long thing with cancer and stuff. And it was this kind of life is short moment. I was not happy working in TV. I learned a lot and I kind of, got as much out of it as I could. But it was also this thing of like, hang on, I wanted to make movies and I had so much more to give than giving people their 5 o'clock game show. So it was at that point that I basically cashed in my life savings and traveled the world for a year. And that was kind of when I really connected with photography properly. I'd always taken photos because it went hand in hand with the filmmaking, but I really just, like, it sounds like the most cliche thing, but I like grieved through the camera, and like it's true, even though I kind of throw up a little bit in my mouth as I say it. It was true. And I kind of felt that, like, I didn't have to be in this big film crew with photography. I could just hold a camera in my hand and click, and there wasn't this whole fanfare of egos and lights and gear and dollies and all that stuff. I can just kind of go, all right, what am I feeling? What am I seeing? And click, and that was it. And I was like, okay, this is kind of, I'm vibing this.
I guess, right?
Yeah. So it was kind of like this back to basics thing where maybe I was over engineering my cinematographer aspirations and getting a bit too carried away when maybe I was always a photographer. So I came home, and then it's kind of hit the play on the same old story for most wedding photographers. I ended up shooting a friend's wedding. Initially, I'm like, hell's no, dude. This is the like cheesiest arse end of photography. Not keen.
This is making TV shows.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, this is like the deal or no deal of photography. So, but I did it. And importantly, he said, you just do it your way. You don't need to do normal wedding photography. You just go for it. Just run with it. And I did. And I basically I was on the path to be a wedding photographer, and I just kind of made that happen through no real strokes of genius, working my ass off, little bits of good luck here and there. And kind of the rest is history in terms of, it kind of kick-started around 10 years now of shooting weddings. And I absolutely friggin' love it. It's awesome.
Oh, that's amazing. Let's dig a little deeper into the TV production, cinematographer side of things, kind of in your history. How do you feel that's shaped the wedding photographer that you are now? Has it shaped kind of how you shoot now?
Totally. And as you can imagine with kind of the filmmaking thing and the TV thing, while on the surface they're similar, they're so different. One is creative, one is technical. And I, as a photographer, I feel like I embody those two universes, which is kind of, interesting. But in terms of, I guess, my first passion in cinematography, I'm really interested in the language of cinematography. I'm going to use this word as all your listeners scoff, like storytelling. Mm-hmm. We all hear this word storytelling, and if you're drinking a can of Coke, you're drinking a story. If you go to a wedding photography workshop, they're storytellers. I get that. Mm-hmm. I'm really interested in geeking out on the language of constructing a story through a sequence of images. And there is this incredible art to it. And I could talk about this for ages, so I won't. We all understand it. We watch Netflix, we see these amazing shows, and we're consuming this language at, angle by angle, shot by shot. We understand this language, and so as a cinematographer, you're just learning how to speak the language. We're all capable listeners, but how do you speak it? And the beauty of applying it to wedding photography, in my view, of course, everyone has their own ideas and philosophies, but what vibes with me is that a single photo won't necessarily do a wedding day justice. If you're a couple getting married, you want the entire day captured. You want the entire day turned into a wedding album in some form or another. You don't just want the mantelpiece photo. And so I think it's actually a really rare genre of photography where if you go to an art exhibition, you might have the same topic or the same subject. If you look at a newspaper, you'll have a scatter of kind of images that have nothing to do with each other in each different news article. There's really no other genre of photography where you really can experiment with really fitting each shot one to the next, right next to each other. Mm-hmm. And so I really love considering that and geeking out on that. So when I hand over the collection of images to the couple, it's really done in a considered way. Mm-hmm. The same goes with blog posts, slideshows, wedding albums. this idea of having intent with how each shot sits together. That is just one of many points to your question. But I guess to kind of maybe more swiftly move through some other points, like cinematography is obviously so much about lighting, and lighting is just one of the big things that keeps me loving what I do, is this dance with light, which is the possibilities are limitless, what you can do with light. So to always keep exploring and always see light in a different way and use it in a different way. And then you have like having all these different colors as a painter on your palette. You've got all these different ways that you can play with light. And I just love it. I'm always learning different ways and different techniques, or stumble across something. But that foundation in cinematography, I think, meant that I could go into wedding photography already with a very good theory-based understanding of light. So that really helped me a lot. Plenty of other points there, but I think they're probably the two key points there. Then with TV, obviously, well, what I was specifically doing in TV for the most part is I was a technical director. Now, there's a few different aspects to that, but the most relevant is that you would sit in the control room and you'd look at all the different camera angles, and you would have what's called a CCU panel, where you're adjusting the color gains, the exposure, the black pedestal, which is kind of like contrast, and you're looking at waveform monitors, and you're making sure that the shots look beautiful and that they match, and that your game show host has lovely skin that's beautifully lit and nice texture and all that stuff. So it really dials your eye into this idea of technical perfection. And just even cutting between two cameras, seeing what's different, seeing what you like about that camera, and then tweaking the other camera to make it similar. I just felt like I really dialed my eye in there. And again, there's probably some other points in terms of bringing TV into what I do, like meticulously planning out the day. Again, with that intersection of kind of the technical stuff and the creative stuff, I'm all about, so much about me getting fun, creative shots that I like to take is actually the boring, meticulous planning and scheduling and stuff like that. So there's an art in the wedding schedule, which I love geeking out on. But yeah, that's probably the main answers around those things fueling me now.
That wedding photography had so much detail in it when you first started. You know, I bet you didn't expect to really dive into it in as much depth as you do now.
You are spot on. And I didn't even intentionally come into it going, oh, I'm going to apply cinematography to wedding photography or anything like that. I just went in with my eyes open. And so, yeah, it's all that kind of reverse engineering and going, oh, actually, when I look at my shots, I'm actually doing all this stuff that I remember reading about in a book in high school. So no, you're spot on.
Absolutely. I mean, with your experience, I mean, you've seen a lot of the industry in a way, you know, not just have you done wedding photography, but TV productions, cinematography, right down to kind of game shows. So, I mean, that must have been a lot of work. You must have been working yourself silly to do all of that. So
yes,
in terms of, did you ever have a burnout? Did you ever have a point where you thought, oh gosh, this is too much?
Yeah, like a number of times actually. And I think that's part of why I've tried to create the wedding photography business that I have now, is to not get myself in those situations again. But there was a particular period. I don't want to focus too much on regaling TV stories, but yeah, one that definitely comes to mind was I was working on this particular series of Dancing with the Stars, where I had a fairly senior role. And it was just so stressful, and I wasn't being respected as a human being. I was really, I had the people above me just really breathing down my neck and not being respected and not having my hard work appreciated, while being so busy. At one point I was in hospital with a migraine and yeah. And then another, actually, no, it's all right. There's so many stories, but yeah, the point being, I did. Well, okay, I'll give you one, because it's not a bragging or a name dropping thing, because I just don't care about that at all. But it was just funny. that I was doing this series of Dancing with the Stars while transitioning to wedding photography. And I, at one point, was pulling up for a wedding to do getting ready shots. And I was on a phone call with Mel B, being the Spice Girl, and her manager talking about lighting. And they were a bit upset about this particular thing. And it was just like, I can't believe I'm just like on the phone with Mel B before I go off and shoot a wedding. And how strange that was. But I was so eager to see all that behind me as well. So
yeah,
anyway.
Absolutely. I mean, what would your tips be? You know, if you've been there, you've done that, you've worn the t-shirt for all that stress. What would your tips be for photographers that, you know, they're at that point, or they're worried they're going to get to that point where they burn out, they've had enough?
Well, yeah, it's an inevitable cycle that everyone who wants to become a wedding photographer is going to start at a certain price point where it's appealing for couples, and you're going through a experience building and a momentum building process. So, and your fear is, oh, this isn't going to work out. People aren't going to want to book me. And inevitably, if you're passionate and you've got some base assets behind you, you are gonna get there. You are going to succeed. So you're always making decisions in terms of your pricing and how many bookings you take on, telling yourself that you might fail, or that's what you're preparing yourself for. So you end up, like everyone ends up in the same situation of kind of very quickly shooting, you know, that 50 plus weddings a year. And it is so exhausting, and it is so not sustainable. There is, of course, fluctuations. There's people I know that shoot 60 plus weddings a year. And good luck to them. That's awesome, but they are going to burn out eventually. That's a certainty. And yeah, so everyone's a little bit different. I had a good few years of doing a really high number of weddings, and I was able to sustain that. And I didn't burn out as such, but the reason I do what I do as a wedding photographer and leaving my past career behind is because I want to do something that I'm genuinely passionate about. I want to make photos that I want to make that excite me, and I want to have couples that really value what I create for them. So can you do that shooting 50 weddings a year? I certainly couldn't. I think I started hitting the play button in my mind and kind of going through the same motions. And then it's like, well, if I'm going to do this, why shouldn't I just be back banging out game shows? So that's where I made some big changes in terms of the structure of my business and stuff.
You know, it's interesting. You touched there really briefly on, you know, shooting for couples that really appreciate your work and love what you do. Do you think if you kind of dig deeper and dig right back, that wedding photography became more appealing because you have that kind of instant gratification when you deliver a gallery, you see the couple's reaction, and you get that feedback as a photographer, don't you? You know, you see their faces light up, you see that they're happy, in stark contrast to kind of what you came from in TV.
Yeah, I'm literally talking about this with my therapist at the moment.
Really?
Well, just this idea of, certainly everyone likes a pat on the back, right? And there's certainly been times in my career in the past where I've felt very unappreciated. That's for sure. You're right. There is these, you can blow couples' minds with what we can do. If we're passionate about what we do, we can really hand over some special images, and not even necessarily the ability ourselves as an artist, but just by being there with the camera in your hand, documenting the day, that in itself, if you are just, have a base skill level to be able to competently do that, I should say, then you're going to blow people's minds. So yeah, it is really cool to have that, that kind of gratefulness from the couple, and appreciation for what you do. And yeah, I'm a bit of a photography geek. I love photography. So if couples really see that, that I've spent that time and care, maybe coming up with a few ideas to try, and that everything's very considered and things like that, there's a whole other level of appreciation there as well. An interesting side note to that, in terms of not just getting that, oh my God, you're amazing, thanks so much, because that's really like a pat on the back thing. Like, I do completely separate to that is more like, I don't know if you know Eckhart Tolle, but he's like wrote The Power of Now and stuff, and he talks about this idea of an inner journey and an outer journey, and you could even perhaps say that validation from others is maybe more of an outer journey, pointless kind of thing, whereas I guess so there's some negative associations with that, but if you look at it more on a spiritual inner purpose thing, that's kind of more what keeps me going, which is regardless of what the couples say in terms of thank yous and all that stuff, is going, I'm like, I just so happen to be at a wedding day with a camera in my hand, but I'm like documenting the human experience, that, you know, it's a regular day for the couple times 1,000, because there's just so much gravity and magnitude to that day. To be kind of freezing these moments in time and handing them over to the couple, that gives me it's not about blowing their minds, it's about going, no, that actually gives me this inner purpose of going, no, this is important, which I really believe. So, you know, we're not saving the world, and we're not, you know, there's so many problems in the world right now, and sometimes I think, man, I think wedding photography is important when, you know, people are dying. And I, you know, while there's some truth to that, I also think it's that, you know, you've got to do what you're passionate about. And if you find purpose in what you do, then there's maybe a place for all things that are important, I guess, or at least that's how I sleep at night.
Absolutely. I mean, touching on a point that you brought up there, it's so easy, isn't it, for us to forget actually how important what we do is. You know, I cast myself back, and I don't think I ever really understood it properly. I got married myself 2 years ago, and we had an amazing day, and we had everybody we wanted there. And 2 months after the wedding, my husband's uncle passed away, and it was totally out of the blue, totally unexpected. He was literally at our wedding night, like the heart and soul of the dance floor. And the photos that we have of him from that night are priceless. Like it just captures exactly who he was. Until we had that experience, I don't think I ever really sat there in my own photography and thought, do you know what, actually what we're doing is really special here, because any one of these people that I'm looking at on this wedding day might not be here this time next year. And
that's it.
You know, it's like you say, capturing something, freezing something in time so that you've got that forever.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so many different facets to that point that you just made. Even when you start to go, like, if they later decide to have kids, then the kids can see their parents before they were even alive. All that kind of stuff. There's also this idea of, even for the couple themselves, I really believe that a photo can convey energy, and perhaps it gets into a bit of a spiritual realm. But, you know, if you've got a photo of yourself on your wedding day and you're just full of love and joy and happiness, if you look at that photo, you are going to absorb some of that energy, not even spiritually speaking, just psychologically, you're going to do that. And I think that's just such a cool gift to be able to give people. And so, there's the really profound examples, like you said, about people passing away and shooting weddings for 10 years. There's plenty of examples of that, as well as the opposite, new people coming into their family. But there's also this thing of just, you know, even the couple themselves, they're going to have some tough times ahead, whether it's as a couple or even as individuals, health, just life ups and downs. And to be able to have this wedding album, you know, ideally on a bookshelf they can pick up and just kind of be transported, it might help them with a bit of perspective on their life, and to be reminded of perhaps maybe what life's more about, which is relationships and love and, you know, the simple stuff. So, I think it's important what we do, for sure.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, your work is very unique. You know, I have no doubt that when, you know, couples are looking for a photographer, if they've seen your work before, they see that and they say, we know that's one of Eric's photos. I can't put my finger on it. That's the only way I can describe it, is there's something really unique about it. So what's your advice to our listeners? How can they kind of find their uniqueness in their work?
Well, first of all, just thank you for saying that. It's something that I think anyone that's really doing this thing, and I say this thing, making stuff, making art, whatever you want to call it. I mean, that's the goal, isn't it? I mean, I don't necessarily think of myself, I'm my biggest critic, so I don't necessarily think of myself as how you've described me. So that genuinely means a lot. And I think of, artists in any realm, whether it's a musician or whether it's a photographer or whatever, it's that thing of going, yep, that's a David Bailey photo, or that's a John Lennon song or whatever, and just going recognizable. Like that's the goal, isn't it? But in terms of advice on how to do that, there is some really tangible things that were key turning points for me to get to a place of, I guess, well, that's the first point, actually. The place that you're creating from. Like, I am a big believer in the more selfish I am as a photographer, the more that it benefits the couple. Mm-hmm. So I think that I really gave myself at a certain turning point to be, in some ways, a precious artist, but really it's more about fighting for the photography, fighting for the amount of time you have in the portrait session, fighting for the time that you do the portraits in the perfect light, slowing things down when you need to. The couple might go, all right, walking down the aisle, and now we go off to the portrait session. No. Hug your family, take some time to be with your family, and really kind of going, it's kind of like what I want, or having that conviction and going, no, this is important. And then it becomes from a very deep internal place, which connects with something we've already talked about, of like that this is important. And kind of, if you help that into being a reality of how the day looks in terms of what you're pointing the camera at and how you can, as the photographer, massage the day to get the best photos, that was key. And it's hard to maybe articulate what we just said, so hopefully it makes sense. But anyway.
No, it does. It's kind of putting that importance on what you do, isn't it? And on you as a profession, not because you want to be a diva and you want to, be the most important person in the room, but because you put importance on what you're able to then deliver to the couple for then doing so.
Yes, what you said. You said it way better. But yeah, some other key points is that I try and avoid looking at wedding photography as much as possible. Now, I can't not see it. There's friends that I want to support. There's competition you might enter. You can't, of course, avoid it. But when you look at creative inspiration, I believe that it's a really big mistake to, as a wedding photographer, go, all right, I've got a wedding tomorrow. I'm going to scroll through my Instagram feed and look at everyone else's wedding photography. For me, I can only speak for me, that is poison to my creative mind. And even just by the sheer comparison that it encourages, by looking at photography in your own sphere, you're not necessarily just soaking it up as inspiration. You're kind of going, oh, they're better than I am, or whatever, this comparison thing that's gross. But also, everything that you put in front of your eyeballs, whether it's a show on Netflix or a painting at an art gallery or Instagram, it's all soaking in. It's all fueling your creative fire. And so I just think it's so important that if you want to make unique stuff, then you need to be curating what you are putting in front of your eyeballs. You need to be, it's like being healthy. And this isn't any new idea that I'm talking about right now. I've heard many other people and wedding photographers talk about this same idea, that it's like having a healthy body, being mindful of what you eat and what you drink. It's the same thing. If you want to have a healthy creativity, then you need to really think about what you're going to put in front of your eyeballs. So avoiding wedding photography is a big one for me. But then also, I love stuff that inspires me. And so like I got records in the background. Like I could be just as inspired to make a photo from a song on Abbey Road as any other thing. It's stimulation. It kind of just gets you inspired and gets you excited to make something. Photo books, cinematography, of course, being with the background there, I have a massive love on that, and it inspires me big time. But the more you kind of soak that in and then actually go, oh, I'm going to file away this shot from Blade Runner, or, oh, that song listening to Come Together on Abbey Road just kind of makes me think about some kind of visual representation of that, and scribbling it down. And that's maybe the final piece of this kind of topic we're talking about now, is then as the photographer, I feel like you've got to consciously go, how can I grab these things that inspire me and consciously turn that into your work? Because that was another turning point for me. How can I tangibly turn that into, I'm making this photo on a wedding day? And that's where things like shot notes, scheduling, all that kind of stuff comes into it for me. So yeah.
Absolutely. Do you know, I spoke to a photographer once, a Mexican photographer, Fur, and he blew my mind in one thing that he said, and it kind of pulls back to getting inspiration from different places and being mindful of, you know, what you're doing and what, you know, what you're absorbing. And he asked me if I'd ever listened to music while shooting a wedding. And I was like, no, absolutely not. Like, how could I do that? He was like, Sally, I do it all the time. Like, put your headphones in, or put one headphone in, have one so that if you're needed, you can be heard. And listen to something that inspires you whilst you're shooting. And literally for days after that, I was just sat thinking about the endless possibilities that must bring up, because music is so powerful, isn't it? You know, you feel so many different things, and we associate songs or music with so many different parts of our lives that imagine listening to music whilst you were creating something like that.
Totally. And it's all about this idea, like when I did drama back in high school, there was this exercise where we needed to come up with a solo performance, but it was this lesson about stimulus. And so we got on the bus and we all went to the beach, and the teacher just kind of guided us through, okay, everyone sit on the ground and just close your eyes, and then just think about what you're hearing. Are you hearing the wind and the grass rustling and waves breaking? And if you just focus your energy on that with your eyes closed, then you start to, things fire off. You start to feel things, and you start to, you know, in that case, come up with some ridiculous solo performance. But yeah, it's the same idea with music. Definitely, it's this idea of stimulus, and it's a transfer of energy that's going to dictate. You know, if you're playing music where the couple can hear it as well, which is something I like to do sometimes, it dictates the mood so heavily, and it helps pull people out of their head as well. Even as a wedding photographer, like often, like I might be feeling anxious or doubtful of myself or whatever. And if there's some great tunes playing, then you can just be going, oh, this is fun, and let's do this shot now. And it just kind of settles the mood a bit. But yeah, it can really dictate it. If you're playing, you know, bangers, then you're going to have a bridal party that's going to be goofing around, having a fun time. Or if you're doing a quiet little moment with the couple and you've got Bon Iver playing, then, you know, it's going to help massage that mood as well. So yeah, totally. Music's great. And same goes with, you know, editing. Having, you know, certain tunes on can help you feel what you're editing and give it a certain aesthetic. Same with shot ideas. Something I really try and do before each shoot is allocate some time to go, right, now it's not about nothing else other than me just going, what's a few ideas I can jot down through the day? And I'm always going to have some music on that inspires me for that. Yeah, it's cool to hear Fur saying the same thing, because he's, you know, one of the greats. And so everyone, you know, is saying the same thing, even, you know, silly old me, that that it's about what you consume. What you put out is what you take in. So
that kind of feeds back into, you know, what you're consuming and what you're allowing yourself to consume, more to the point, all feeds back into your mindset, doesn't it? And, you know, mindset, bit of a taboo subject, you know, sometimes in the industry or in, you know, in life in general, but it's massive, isn't it? You know, people, if you work on your mindset and you work on having a creative, positive mindset, that's only then going to feed into your work, isn't it?
Totally. And, you know, in terms of like I said earlier, I feel like one of the worst things for me to do is to just be looking at wedding photography on Instagram, and there's just, your mindset just gets toxified in the idea of kind of going like, how many likes did that photo get, or what are they doing, or they're doing something really cool, and how did they do that? And all these doubt and comparison, and yeah, I really think that's very unhealthy for your mindset. Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you have any advice for listeners that, they hear you, they hear what you're saying, they understand mindset's massive, but they don't even know where to start on being conscious of their mindset or trying to improve and have a creative mindset?
Well, I guess that creative fire isn't something you can give someone. Wedding photographers are going to be doing what they do for a whole range of different reasons. And that's where, if people are listening to this right now, people are going to connect with me or not connect with me. There's wedding photographers out there that can be very, very business minded, and I'm inspired by their hustle and all that kind of stuff. But I do what I do because I like taking photos of real people, and so that's kind of what drives me. And so that then dictates my mindset. And then the mindset then trickles down into everything. What you do when you've got a camera in your hand, what you do when you're doing admin or talking to a couple, editing a photo, whatever it might be. That's kind of the top of the pyramid. So, the whole cliche thing that they say at workshops is like, what is your why? It's kind of a bit of that kind of vibe, is like, what's your, why are you doing this? And then if you can answer that, then that will help kind of guide everything from there. So yeah, I do think it's this fundamental, why are you doing this? What do you want to get out of it? Because it's not just as simple as, for me, taking photos. It's also, I co-parent my son. I want to be present as a dad and have time with my beautiful boy. So then that dictates, not dictates, it influences how many weddings I want to shoot. And a lot of that kind of, so I guess they're kind of goals, aren't they? Just goals that you want from your business and your art.
The lifestyle of being a wedding photographer, being in the wedding industry, videographer, is very much a chosen lifestyle, isn't it? I always say to people, people ask me if I love what I do, and I say, if I didn't love what I do, I certainly wouldn't be doing it, because you have to be so passionate and so dedicated to be in the wedding industry, whatever supplier you are, not just photographers.
Totally.
But it's one of those things, isn't it, that you very much, it's a lifestyle that you choose to do. It's very different to a 9 to 5. Yes, you can choose to take the day off and go out with your family, but equally you can also be working all the hours God sends on back-to-back weddings and height of season weddings. It's very much finding that balance, isn't it?
Absolutely. Finding that balance. And yeah, everyone will inevitably make their mistakes as they do that, and be overcommitted. I think everyone probably comes into it a bit naive, don't you think, in terms of, you just have to shoot a wedding on the weekend, like, a bit of editing, a few emails, 5 days a week off, your beauty, which is of course not the case. So yeah, things like compartmentalizing your time or allocating your time. You need to be extra mindful of that when you're your own boss. And that work-life separation as well. All of those things are super, super important. And yeah, everyone's going to naturally make their own mistakes there.
Any strategies perhaps that you can share with our listeners about how you really separate that work-life balance?
Yeah, I do really like to kind of plan out my days. I've just used like my calendar in Apple land and really kind of have some key things for me to do that day. And then or to not do. When I'm with my son, I do very little work, if at times no work at all. And so it's kind of, when I'm looking at my calendar, it's like, okay, well, what do I need to cram into this week so that the next week I can be, the best dad I can be.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really do find it's important to allocate that time. Also, I guess another kind of, pearl of wisdom, if you like, is that you could potentially make the mistake of, if I just work my butt off and work long days and 7 days a week, that's going to equate to a good thing. And I think the opposite is true, in that if you for example, if you go, I'm going to stop working at 5 p.m. When I'm working at home, no matter what, then it means that you can give your mind a holiday and you can do some other things, take the dog to the park or watch a show or open a photo book or spin a record or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you kind of prioritize yourself at the top of the pyramid, then everything else will benefit. And for me, I find that I'm more productive when I'm working if I've made sure I've had time to not work.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do see people making that mistake where it's just I need to work my butt off and that's going to equal the best results.
It's kind of if you transfer it back into like a typical 9 to 5 where you'd be sat at a desk for somebody else, employed by somebody. And if your working hours were 9 to 5, would you still be there at 6, 7, 8, midnight?
Yeah,
you certainly wouldn't. You'd be out that door
that's right.
at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
You know, I have the same thing. So I used to just work off a laptop, and you know, I was just kind of milling around. I'd sit on the sofa some days. I'd be in the kitchen at the coffee bar another day. It wasn't a good way to work for me. So I made a dedicated office space that I could close the door on at the end of the working day, so that I wasn't then tempted to just go, oh, my laptop's just there, so I could just, you know, edit another 100 weddings while I'm another 100 photos even while I'm watching this TV program. When I'm done, the door's shut and I'm away.
Yeah. And it just means that I think when those hours pass and then you do open your laptop to do some more work, you're fresh. You've had it out of your mind, and it's like, okay, what am I up to? What am I doing? And then it can even be enjoyable and exciting to get stuck into some things that you're working on, as opposed to I'm doing this still and I finished up at 3 a.m. last night. So yeah, it's important stuff to figure out for sure.
Absolutely. So Eric, you are a very inspirational person yourself, but I'm sure you must have people that inspire you or have inspired you along your journey. I'd love if you could share a couple of those with us.
Sure. I mean, in terms of it's funny, like, yeah, I guess at the moment I'm going down this Beatles rabbit hole, right? Like I've always loved the Beatles, but I'm you know, there's a few docos. There's one on Disney Plus, which is like Paul McCartney just sitting over a mixing desk and just regaling stories of making this incredible music. And what you hear are the parallels of anything that is creative, which is kind of the idea of problem solving. Creativity is, in a way, just problem solving. What restrictions are there in terms of time or equipment or whatever it might be, and how can we kind of solve that problem? And I love music heaps. So, and I'm very nostalgic with music. And I just find whenever I hear an interview or even just listen to the music, that message is so clear. So that's kind of the answer at the moment for me. But also, you know, it's specifically, I'd have to give a shout out to Gabe McClintock, who's an incredible wedding photographer. Now, we just hung out for a few days at a workshop we so happened to be presenting together at in the UK. But we struck up a friendship, but he just left such an impression on me of being such a humble, talented, kind, gentle, generous human being. And that interaction has sat with me ever since. And so if I was to name anyone in our sphere, it would just be him and only him. He just left such an impression on me on a human level, not even as a wedding photographer, just a dude. So I'd have to give him a shout out there. And it's not about going, oh, everyone, you know, needs to go to a Gabe workshop or anything, although they'd get a lot out of it. It's more just kind of this idea of just kind of mindset. You know, we use that word mindset. He really inspired me to review my mindset in ways that no one has to that degree, you know, before or since. So that's a little shout out for Gabe. God love him. But yeah, I think outside of that, I'm very much interested in the greats in terms of photography. I'm looking over to my stack of books, and there's the Avedon and the Irving Penn and Ansel Adams and James Nashway. Those kind of the greats there. There is so much to learn from these incredible photographers. So often we refer to ourselves as photojournalists, as wedding photographers. But if you look at the greatest photojournalism of all time, it's a very different style technically to what we consider photojournalism in wedding photography. In generally speaking, of course.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of inspo there. Renaissance painters, Rembrandt, Caravaggio, and everyone else. But I definitely love geeking out on their use of low-key lighting and creating dramatic imagery through light. So that would be a few.
Thank you very much. That's lots of inspiration for everybody to go away with there. That's awesome. Now, Eric, if you could start your career all over again, is there anything you would change?
It's funny. So this was the one where, no, the answer is no. I wouldn't change anything because it probably fires off my little spiritual part of me that I keep under wraps, which is that I think so much about life is about learning lessons. Yeah. And so I've made a lot of mistakes as a wedding photographer. There's no doubt about that. But what would I go back and unlearn? Because they're all just mistakes that then lead to lessons. And so there's nothing that I would do differently. Yeah, I went through stages where I worked too hard. It affected my personal life. I got burnt out. But it's like that was life's path for me. And I've come out the other side having learnt that and having a wedding photography business where I love what I do. Yeah. And I've got time to be an awesome dad. So, no regrets. Yeah.
That's just it, isn't it? It's if you hadn't learned that lesson back then where, you burnt out and it affected your personal life, you wouldn't be so conscious to spend time now with your child and make sure that you're not working when you're being a dad.
Exactly. Yeah. And then I think, but I guess from there, so that's kind of in a broad sense. Maybe some tangible things were some of the things I mentioned earlier were, getting off, steering clear of wedding photography on Instagram is something that, like the earlier you do that, the better, in my opinion. I mean, I guess everyone's different, but for me, that was just really significant. Yeah. Some stuff like that. And just those penny drop moments, are really significant. So yeah, I guess in theory, if you wound back the clock, maybe you'd kind of do that sooner. But like we said, this is all about making mistakes and learning lessons. So that's all. Yeah.
If you could add a final piece of advice for our listeners, something that's either made a big difference in your personal life, your business life, what would that one piece of advice be?
Another one that I just can't help but get airy-fairy about, which is that we talked earlier about what we do as being important, and that is true. But what's even more important is the life experience that we create for ourselves. And I believe that when one day we leave the earth, that really the only thing that you can take with you, whether it's in some kind of spiritual reality or whether it's just the parting few seconds of your life, the only thing that matters is the human relationships that you've experienced. And I get choked up now just because that's like just how much I believe that. Like who cares what size TV you had? Who cares how many thousands of dollars you made out of wedding photography? Who cares how many wedding photographers knew who you were? Like it means zero. I think it's a lovely legacy to have created something that you believe in and giving it to the couples that you've had the pleasure to work with, no doubt. But even then, is that something you're going to reflect on in the last few moments of your life? I'm not sure you would. I'd be thinking more about my son and the life experience through relationships. So while that doesn't have anything to do with wedding photography, I think it has everything to do with wedding photography as well. That, again, it's these core values and mindset that kind of dictate everything. It's like the top of the pyramid, and then it trickles down into everything. And so, yeah, for me, talk about mistakes. Have I screwed up having my priorities in the wrong place and sacrificing my relationships? Like, yeah, I have. Like, I've really screwed up badly in my life there. But I've learned these lessons and know that the people close to me are more important than anything else. And that's what I think the life experience from, we're all learning. Who knows what life's about? But my gut feeling is it's about the relationships that we have, that have a little piece in our heart. That's that's got to be the most important thing, right?
Absolutely. I love that. If our listeners would like to get in contact with you, find out some more about you, where can they do that, Eric?
Yeah, sure. Just hit me up on Insta. My handle is Eric Ronald Photo. And don't just kind of jump on my account. Send me a message. I love connecting with people and have a little chat. So yeah, that's probably the best way to do it.
Amazing. Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been such an inspirational conversation. I have no doubt that the listeners' minds have been blown today with this one.
Awesome. Look, it's an honor to be asked. So thanks so much for your time. Thanks for the lovely questions. And yeah, it's been a hoot.
It's a pleasure. I'll catch you soon.
Cheers, Sally.
Thanks, Eric. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, guys, that's everything from me today. Thank you so much again to Eric for joining us. It was a fantastic chat and I really enjoyed it. If you'd like to see the show notes, you can head to www.studioninja.co/episode 43. Please don't forget to rate us on the podcast platform that you're listening on. A little bit of love goes a very long way. I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of NinjaCast, brought to you by Studio Ninja. Beautifully designed and super easy to use, Studio Ninja will help you manage your leads, clients, shoots, invoices, contracts, workflows, and so much more. To learn more or start your 30-day free trial, go to www.studioninja.co.